For now, I should introduce myself, or perhaps you could introduce me. Who am I? Who knows my name? Say it again. What's my name? Gandalf? Gandalf, yes, that's what they used to call me. Does a quick nerd check. Does anybody know any other of my names? I've been called many things over the years, over the millennia, I should say. Anyone? No? Mithrandir? Does that sound familiar to anybody? Perhaps you're not readers. Let me say a much more formal introduction and say good afternoon. Now, what do you mean by that? Do you mean to wish me a good afternoon? Or that it is a good afternoon whether I want it or not? Or that you feel good this afternoon, or that it is an afternoon to be good on? There is a right answer. I'm waiting for it. The correct answer is all of them at once. I'm very happy to be here. Professor Miller sends his regards, and he asked me to be here today to offer some perspective on the question of identity and spirituality, with a special reference to the question of stories and how stories create or frame identity or help you learn who you are. And I take the word identity, which is a very, very large word, isn't it? A very, very large word indeed, to mean identity in the largest sense, meaning who are you? What? And I wish to make the argument that stories are here to help you learn what your destiny is. Now, and I don't just mean any stories, really. I guess I should come clean and say that I'm talking largely about the kinds of stories that I come from. Now, or people like me, right? You all, in this very interesting modern age, are very familiar with these stories. They are stories that have wizards and monsters and superheroes, specters, ghouls, vampires, works of the imagination. You're reading a story right now by Octavia Butler that uses the imagination to help you understand who you are. So these stories are very common, and they are not just common, are they? They are very, very popular. Perhaps most of you are a little young for this, but did any of you arrive at your bookstore before midnight prior to the release of the latest Harry Potter book? No? Are you all too young for that? How many of you are fans of Harry Potter? Yes. Those books, and books like the story from which I come, are extraordinarily popular in your world. And is that not the most extraordinary fact? Is it not? You live in a world in which the magic comes to you by virtue of science and technology. You hobbits, if I may say, you hobbits have achieved things with your science and technology, and Professor Sullins 2 weeks ago, my good friend, I should say, Professor Sullins, 2 weeks ago, taught you some things about the magic of your technology. You live in a world in which that technology has enabled you all to do things that prior generations had to imagine, dreamed of. And yet you, all of you, retreat or escape into stories like the one from which I came. These are the most popular stories in your world. Stories of adventure, stories about the endless struggle between the light and the darkness. I come from one of those stories, right? Now, I'm here to do 3 things for you today. One is to convince you that these stories are indeed the kinds of stories that in many ways matter most to you, okay? And that they will always matter, because they have always mattered very much to hobbits like you. Second, I wish to explore some common wisdom that arises from this body of stories. And finally, I cannot forbear to leave you with some special wisdom that these stories have to teach us. Let us start with the first part, stories. These stories, these myths. Now, that's because that was I and Professor Tolkien who wrote the stories from which in which you might find me, right? Professor Tolkien thought of these stories in the same category as the oldest literature in the world, which we commonly call mythology. Now, mythology are these tales. Mythology is the body of these tales that are about heroes and maidens and witches and gods and goddesses and as I said earlier, the eternal struggle between the light side and the dark side. These stories have always been the stories that have gripped the human imagination, and they still grip your imaginations today. Now, I come from one of these stories called The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, the literature by Professor Tolkien. How many of you are familiar with the story of The Lord of the Rings? Help me rehearse the story, please. Who is the main character of the story? You saw him. Frodo. What does Frodo have to do? What is his task? How about the show of hands? Who can tell me? What is Frodo's task? Thank you. Thank you. What is the ring? Someone else. What is this ring? I'm waiting. What is this ring? Perhaps it's too complicated a question, but there are simple answers too. Who made this ring? Well, yes? Who? Sauron. Who is Sauron in this world? Yes? Who is Sauron? Who is Sauron? Yes? Yes? Is your hand up? Oh, can we turn the sound up, please? Thank you. And I apologize. Is that okay? Further?
Mine doesn't sound on.
It is on. I think I've discovered the problem. The beard. There we go. How's that? Thank you. Your modern magic can't work with it very well. Sorry. Okay, who is Sauron? Who is Sauron? Yes, the bad guy. Thank you very, very much. You might call him, as frequently called in stories like this, modern stories, the Dark Lord. Right? Another possible term for Sauron in his world would be the devil. The devil, to use old religious terminology. Okay, so Frodo has to take the ring, has to destroy the ring. Why? Why does Frodo need to destroy this ring? One more question, then I will be done. If Frodo does not destroy this ring, what happens? Exactly. The Sauron and the ring are one. They are the same. And if Sauron and the ring are rejoined, great, great evil, catastrophe, enslavement, and a dark empire is going to come to Middle-earth. Correct? Does Frodo succeed? I'll just tell you the answer. Yes, he does succeed. You just saw the climactic scene of the story in which Frodo succeeds in destroying the ring. Yes? But it is a complicated kind of success, isn't it? Frodo fails, in a sense. Which is why I asked the question of you at the outset. What would you do? Would you succeed? Would you be better than Frodo? I think that is the question that the story is asking you. And in fact, now I will go into a little bit of an exposition of that question. Imagine that one day you wake up and it is as if the world has changed overnight because last night your very oldest and wisest friend brought you the news that that thing that you love so well, that thing that is so precious to you, that thing that is most precious to you is not the good, beneficent object, harmless object, helpful thing that you thought it was. It is, in fact, it was, in fact, made by the devil. And you, only you, can get rid of this thing. Now, what would that thing be if we were going to push this analogy? Only you can say, I think. Could it be a relationship? Could it be an object? Could it be an idea? Something that helps you get through your days? An ideology? A conception? It could be anything. But it could very well happen in your life at some point that that thing that you thought was the most precious object, the most precious thing, the thing that is at the center of your identity, it enables you to be all of who you are. It's actually evil. And only you can get rid of it. And now here is the real problem, because getting rid of it is no easy task. Getting rid of it requires a journey, a long adventure into hell. Why? Because only in hell lives the great, destructive, and creative fire in which that thing was forged. So you set out. You set out. The good news is that you don't have to go alone. Who would you take on your journey? Well, might you take your servant? In other words, might you take the person who is dedicated to supporting you the most, your best friend? That would be a good idea. Might you take that old wise friend, that wizard person? Maybe you would. Might you take warriors, one of whom might just turn out to be the future king? Might you take your young cousins? In the story, they're called Merry and Pippin, right? Why would you do that? Well, perhaps you need a strong jolt of innocence. You can't do this without carrying your innocence along. All right, so you set out with your companions. And immediately, and here's the bad news, immediately you are beset by forces of darkness that want that thing and want you to claim that thing and become a force of darkness, a ghost, a wraith, a demon like them. With luck, with help, with skill, with all the faith that you have, perhaps you will make it a long way. However, might you too, like Frodo, be joined finally by one final companion that you neither expected nor wanted. Now, who is this person? This person looks a lot like you. This person even talks your language, but does so in a way that you do not, is not comfortable. This person is ugly, speaks very, very ill. This person stinks. This person is the last person you would want to go with you. And the story of this person is called, who knows? Gollum, Smeagol. The sad, sad story of Smeagol. Well, why would you need that person? The last person in the whole world you would want to take with you. Perhaps it's because that is the only person who knows his way into that darkness. Now, let me ask you to consider that all of these different people that you take with you, are they parts of you? Is your Sam with you, the one who loves you and cares for you, the inner person that loves and cares for you? Is that person available to help you? Are your Merry and Pippin there? Your innocence, are they still with you? Do you have inner warriors? Do you have your inner wizard, your inner wise one? And do you know your inner Gollum, your inner Smeagol, the one that you have hated, the part of you that you have hated and loathed all these years, the part of you that got you into this mess in the first place, right? But what is the possibility that that person will be the key? Now, only you can say whether you will succeed in your own quest. But I put it to you that stories like The Lord of the Rings and all those stories that are so popular in your age ask you to ask yourselves whether you will succeed in your mission, your journey, your adventure, the adventure of your life. They ask you to turn your life into an adventure, to imagine your life as an adventure, and not just an adventure for your own personal success, failure, etc., but rather an adventure for the whole world, in which the fate of the whole world is in your hands. I think my theory, my hypothesis about why this literature is so powerful and important to you hobbits, you modern hobbits, rests in this answer, that you all, perhaps because of your fascination, the magic of your world, the technomancy, if I may put it, all the ways that this particular magic of science and technology have allowed you to live in ways that prior generations could not possibly have imagined. I think it possible that you need these stories more than any other generation before. That is why they are so popular. I ask you to consider that. End of part 1. So, to rehearse, I'm asking you to imagine that when you watch films or read stories, like the one you are reading right now by Octavia Butler, to imagine that those stories are not just about other characters, that they are not just escape, a very interesting word, escape, but they are in fact about you. They implicate you, they ask you to be certain kinds of a certain kind of person. Okay, so let me talk now for a little while about some of the wisdom that these old tales bring forward. And here, I'm going to challenge Professor Sullins, my friend Professor Sullins. Let me take a moment and encourage you to take classes from Professor Sullins. Professor Sullins teaches classes about me, about the literature of Professor Tolkien, about all kinds of literature like this, and he asks questions that I think you will find very, very interesting to answer. And I wish you also to know that Professor Sullins is the best swordsman that you have in your community here. When the theater arts department requires training in using swords when they're acting Shakespeare and things like that, they ask Professor Sullins to come over and teach them how to do it. So, I like Professor Sullins very much. We are good friends. However, I'm very worried about the message that he brought to you 2 weeks ago. He asked you to consider whether your technology, whether your tools, was the word that he used, might be intrinsically part of your identity. Right? Yes? And his answer was unequivocally yes. I agree. I wish to say that at the outset. Still working? Sorry. I agree. However, the stories, the ancient stories that I am talking about, suggest that that is only the beginning of the answer. It's only a partial answer. It's only it's a doorway into much more important questions. For instance, I've got to make sure this is working. Sorry. For instance, think about the story from which I come. Sauron and the ring are one, yes? Sauron and the ring are one, meaning Sauron and his tool are the same identity. Now that brings up a very serious question, does it not? Is the question not then who you are, what comprises you, but rather what will you do with the tools that you have? Because the tools that you have could be used for good or for evil, right? So it is merely the beginning to say that you and your tools are one. These stories tell us again and again that we must be very, very careful about how we identify with our tools. And they tell us again and again that our uses of our tools are all that matter, which means that the question of identity is not a question of what you are, as he asked, but rather, what do you do? You might remember one or two quotations I wish to read. One goes like this: I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. It's from the movie, the film, the first of the 3 films by Mr. Jackson. My answer to Frodo in that moment was, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to do is decide what to do with the time that we have. Another quotation: it is our choices Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. What story is that from? One of the Harry Potter books, yes? So, if it is our choices that show what we are, then I would put it to you that your identity is far more a matter of morality. It's a moral question, not a tools question, a technical question. And I wish you to take this injunction with great seriousness, because as I said, I believe that these stories are especially important to you because I believe that your world is at another precipice, just as in the story from which I come. I believe your world is another time, another place in which the forces of darkness and the forces of evil are contending to the potential conflagration in which great good or great evil may come to pass. So, you are all involved in an adventure in which these questions of morality and your own choices matter very, very much. Now, what do the stories have to tell you about how you might succeed as Frodo did, or at least as he tried? I think this is a hard question. This is where it gets, this is where you must face your own inner landscape. I'll give you one hint. One way in which I worry about the message that Professor Sullivan's brought to you is that it may be possible that the longings that are expressed in his lecture, that is, the longings to imagine yourselves as being more than, as encompassing your technology as well as your biological selves, however you would put them. Are those, this is the question for you, are those yet another long history of instances in which human beings have expressed a longing, the oldest human longing, and that is the longing for immortality? I think you know what I mean. Is it possible that in the wish to, for instance, replace parts of you, that you are simply reaching for that dream of being immortal? Yes? This is one of the oldest dreams that human beings has ever had. The great pyramids of Egypt, yes, bids for immortality, right? The magnificent edifices built specifically to showcase the immortality of a particular king in those times. Okay, all right. Today, in your world, are there ways in which people seek to expand themselves into immortality in that same way? Do you know that of the more than 7 billion people in your world, half of you all live in abject poverty? Do you know that a very, very small number of people, a few hundreds of people, own as much wealth, literally, as billions of other of you? And some of those individuals appear to spend all their time trying to become more wealthy. You have Sauron in your midst. But I do not wish to let you off the hook. How do you pile up things to stave off the sense of your own impending end? How do you do that? The stories tell us that that longing for immortality is a great, great sin. That it is great foolishness, out of which great evil emerges into the world. I'm not telling you that you should seek your end. Exactly the opposite is my message to you today. The point is, how are you not living? How are you not living in order that you might feel immortal? How are you giving over your sense of being alive by creating the walls of a pyramid around you? That's a question for you for your seminar sections. I think the longing for immortality is a common one. And I think your tools are neither good nor evil, unlike the ring, seriously. But if your tools become more important to you than the green hills, than the breath in your lungs, than your loved ones, then all the blessings that you have around you every day, if you would only wake up and see them, then I think you have left the path of wisdom. And the stories tell us that again and again and again, that the blessing of life is precisely, the beauty of life precisely arises because of your mortality. It is death which makes life beautiful, meaningful, and blessed, and sacred. In the stories of Professor Tolkien, human mortality is the gift of God, or Iluvatar, as God is named in his books. And you should pity, the stories say you should pity the elves who live forever. So, that is for your consideration. Now, I will end with some good advice. This is the wisdom of the ages, so you had better listen up. Number one relates to the point I just made to you. Excuse me. Number one. Wake up. Reject boredom. There is never any reason in the world for you to be bored. Every moment of every day, the world calls to you, to your imagination, to your sense of being alive, to your longing for beauty and wholeness and the glories of creation. There is never any reason to be bored. Wake up. Number two, be selfish. What do I mean by that? There is a kind of selfishness, particularly for you young hobbits. There is a kind of selfishness that is not selfish at all. This is the kind of selfish in which you work to develop your own gifts, your own abilities, your own strengths. You will not succeed in the adventure of your life without undertaking training, without allowing yourself to focus all of your attention on yourself for longer than you might want to, This is not to say that you shouldn't also be of service to people. Of course you should. But it is to say that it is no sin at all to allow yourself to grow. Point 3, do your work. This is a crotchety old man talking to you, okay? Do your work. Read. Read everything. Read constantly. That is why you are here in this amazing place called the university. That is why you are here. Read constantly. Read everything you are asked to read, and read more. Your doing that may well be the difference between your future success and your future failure. Finally, simply do your work for immediate and selfish reasons. Because if you don't do your work, particularly in your classes, you cannot pass. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Thank you for your attention.